Hey guys, welcome back to Michio Makes. My name is Michio, and I like to make stuff. Today we've got part 5 of the Toyota Sprinter Trueno AE86 by DeAgostini. This part is actually kind of interesting because if you look down at this label right here, you can focus in on this. But it basically says if you are buying these issues from the bookstore, you need to start subscribing, and they're not going to actually have these in the bookstores anymore. So it's actually kind of funny that they kind of give you a taste the first 5 issues. They usually have a wider distribution in the bookstores, but then when it comes down to actually subsequent issues, they will probably have them. They want you to subscribe, basically. They don't want you buying these at the bookstore anymore because there's just going to be too many issues, right? They're not going to be able to have back stock or anything like that. So just kind of as a fair warning to their customers, they put a little alert: if you bought this from a bookstore, make sure you subscribe if you want to complete the model. This is kind of like part 4, where it's actually not a box. It looks like it's just a cover with some cardboard inside, but we can take a quick peek at what is actually going to be in here. And from what I can see right here, is that going to be in focus? Yeah, I can see right there. Maybe we can zoom in for you guys a little bit more. That black thing, that looks like the cylinder block. I'm almost positive that's a cylinder block. We got a spring here. We've got some other parts down here. I have to look up real quick. Okay, so it looks like we have the cylinder block right here, and it's listed right here. We've got a McPherson strut right here too as well. We've got some water bypass valves, and also a spring, some screws. So it's actually kind of interesting to see these kind of little bits and pieces that looks like they're going to be fit together on the kind of bigger cylinder head, and the block itself. But it's kind of interesting that this is actually a really small kind of kit. Relatively speaking, it's actually pretty thin too as well. So I'm really curious to take a look at this cylinder block here too as well, because if you guys know metal, cylinder blocks are usually cast iron, and iron is actually a lot heavier than the heads itself, so which are usually aluminum. So the actual block itself is normally pretty heavy on a car. This is a very, very light kit, and I'm curious if this is plastic or not. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break this open and take a look. As it was before, kind of a cardboard cover. It's actually just a frame of a box, so it's not even on a full box. Oh wow, actually comes like more of a bag now. Got the order form, it looks like, if you would like to, I guess, get onto a subscription. And the instruction booklet. So before looking at the parts, let's look at the instruction booklet. So it looks like a lot of these parts are going to be part of the intake, with having the intake on the block itself too as well. Some more flavored history. Looks like it's actually about the suspension itself too as well. Yep. I'll go ahead and actually adjust the camera so you guys can see that. The suspension. The AW11. Now, if you guys didn't know, the AW11 MR2, or sometimes known as Mr. 2, is a car that came out the same time as the Corolla, but it actually is obviously sportier because it was a mid-engine. So the engine was actually in the back of the around the trunk area, and it was rear-wheel drive too as well. So the vehicle actually tended to sometimes oversteer because you had a lot less weight in the front, but you had better traction in the back too as well. They actually came with the same engine, the 4AGE, in this vehicle, and again, as I mentioned previously, that they actually had trim levels of the supercharged version, which was the red top 4AGE in these AW11 MR2s. You can still find these around, but they are pretty rare, especially with the Corolla or the AE86 too as well. So I think it's really cool that they include some information around the AW11. Again, they are trying to get you to subscribe. So here is some more stuff you can get if you subscribe, and you should upgrade to as well. More AW11 flavor. Make sure you guys can actually read that focused. The interiors were pretty similar, but the AW11 had some definitely different trim stuff than the AE86. Oh yeah, and also don't forget one of the biggest things is the AW11, since the engine's in the back, could only seat 2 people. Period. There was a little bit of a trunk, and you had a little bit of room in the front, but with the engine back there, you really had no room. And we jump right into the instructions. So, just preliminary looking at this. Let's actually see if I can zoom back out. No, that's as far as I can go. Looks like we're building a shock here. You guys can see that. Make sure that's in focus. One of the shocks. It looks like this actually will go on the suspension portion that we had built last part. Cross member. Wow, actually, this is kind of interesting. No, like I don't know if this is like a lowering setting, but it looks like it's kind of interesting how they have this. I'm gonna have to read up on this. And it looks like we're actually adding in parts of the block to the head itself. That's pretty cool. And then the intake manifold to the block itself. And then this is going to be the end result. We're actually going to get the head mounted to the block, and then one of the parts of the suspension attached to the cross member here. So this is actually a little bit of flavor text around Hakone. I just used Google Translate because that kanji is pretty difficult. But it looks like a cool little mountain pass that they'd probably do a lot of toge runs on. And then the back page too as well. Awesome. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started in the kit. Let's take a look at it. So it's a little bit different than what we've had previously, where they had like kind of a blister pack. We've actually got a bag, it looks like. It was probably cost saving, weight saving too as well. Let's get this opened up. So it's still kind of a blister pack, but it's definitely, less with the paper and more of just kind of the mold is they have it as such that all you need to do is pull it apart now. So let's go do that. I'll take a look at all these pieces. Try not to spill any of them. I'll put this to the side. So first off, let's just get this out of the way. The block. Let's take a peek at it. Oh, actually, this is just a part of the block. And my fears were unfounded. I'll go ahead and zoom in and then also get a pretty good detail. I was really concerned by the weight of this and thinking of the package, the whole package, thinking, okay, this is gonna be not metal, but luckily for me, it is actually. This block is metal. It is probably aluminum or I don't know, maybe a pewter, but it's definitely metal. If you can hear that in the microphone, this is metal, and which is great because engine blocks are usually metal, cast iron, and it would be kind of weird if this was like a plastic. But this is a definitely nice, hefty metal piece. Next part we have is, I believe, a coolant line, hard coolant line. Another one. Just the details of having stuff like this. That's what I really wanted when I found this kit. And I've said this multiple times, is that I really wanted a kit that had a ton of engine detail, and this definitely fit the bill. I believe this is a shock mount. And it's actually, I'm curious about how this is going to get set up. I might actually watch one of the videos of how to assemble this portion to make sure I don't screw this one up. But this shock mount is actually metal too as well. So looks probably the same type, but it is metal. I'm not too sure what this part is. This is not the starter, is it? It might be part of the coolant system too as well. We'll take a look. Here's our spring, and this is metal, and oh man, that is definitely a tough spring. So I'm pretty pressing on that pretty hard. That's awesome. So it's actually have some nice suspension. Looks like a mounting point arm for the suspension part 2 as well. The strut. I believe that I saw this was part for the mounting of the actual block itself. Here's the strut mounting, and this is metal too as well. So there's a lot of metal pieces on this, which is great. I actually really like that. It definitely takes that in that it's kind of a die cast model, you know. The part for the suspension. And for the screws, we have CM and AM. And you can tell definitely that one is a little bit longer than the other. And that, oh, and we have like one more part here I almost missed. And that looks like a part for the suspension too as well. Okay, after some Google Translate and actually checking out the QR code right here, the first step we're going to do is actually assembling the McPherson strut here by actually inserting these parts together. You can see actually the detail in some of these. Like, you have to align this spacer actually exactly it is. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me zoom in just a little bit. But there is a really slight variance in the look of this right here. Let's see. See that? It's a really small, like this little lip is a little bit bigger and it's a little smaller. This is the piece right here. And you got to make sure that you get this aligned properly. Let's see if I can show it in the back of my hand. There it is. Take a look at that. Take it out of focus. Right there. Very, very small difference in the edges, and you got to make sure that gets aligned properly to get this assembled right. So, first step, we're going to grab strut housing, and then we're going to take this portion right here, and I usually like to do, it's kind of hard to see with black on black background. I'll do it like here. This is pointed up. And then let's point it down like this, and we insert this right here. And on the bottom end is where we put this portion. Now we want to make sure this is lined up correctly. You guys see that? This fatter edge down here needs to give it the bottom. And part of our assembly is actually bringing back this piece. This is actually the cross member that we actually assembled last video. So we actually have to put this in this housing, referencing this photo right here, down on the edge here. I believe it's this one right here. I'm going to double and triple check so I do not screw this up. Yep. So we're going to want to stick this edge with the spacer there and this hole at the very end, that one right there, and then use screw number CM. It's one of these guys. And one thing they mentioned is do not over tighten this, because if it over tightens, then the car won't be able to turn the wheels. Flip it over. Screw this in slowly. Obviously this bracket is going to be want to go in here because we have a tie rod that we're actually going to be porting over. Can you guys see that? I'm having a little trouble with my lighting, so you can actually see what I'm doing. I've got the push right here. Screw this down a little bit more. Not too tight, but also not too loose. There we go. Good. So it could still turn, but it's not super tight. And the next part is taking this tie rod here. And the details in this tie rod, it's actually crazy, because you can see there's a slight angle to that right there. And for this part, it's going to take the AM screws and a couple of them. One thing we do have to kind of keep in mind is that this portion of the power steering rack needs to be up. I believe there's going to be probably steering or another part of the suspension is going to be bolted into this portion. This needs to be up. And then the tie rod is going to be assembled like that. You guys see that? Right there. I'm just going to double check and make sure I get the alignment correctly put on. Okay. So this one is going to be put right here. This up like that. So you guys can see that. I'm sorry about this black background. Kind of hard to see. Takes an AM screw, and then the angle of this tie rod needs to be pointed up like that. piston first, right here. I'm going to do my best to try to make sure everything stays in frame so you guys can see it. Okay, that looks good. Angled up correctly. Next part is to take another AM screw. And we're going to put this tie rod on the strut. So this needs to actually connect to this, like that, like so. Can you guys see that? This connected to that, like that. All right. Now you can see the steering portion. Turn the wheel and a turn. That's awesome. Now the next portion is going to be kind of interesting because we've got to get the spring on. And apparently it's not going to be super easy. They actually recommend you use a towel to help compress the spring to actually try to get this on. And then you'll use this kind of hook portion here to kind of latch it down, which is actually kind of funny because in a real 86, this is actually just one single piece. You don't have any kind of hooking features like this. Yeah, there's no hooking features. We've got you'll add a little nub here to help lock this in. So this is what they want you to do with the spring on. Put this down here, put it in here, and then lock it in like that. Right on, lock in. But you've got to do it with the spring on. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. I'll zoom out you guys a little bit. Let's see. Hopefully I don't pinch my fingers. They don't want you to, but this is actually a pretty stiff spring. I'll go right there. Just focus real quick. Alright, let's give it a shot. Oh, it's not too bad. Here you go. Locked in. Obviously, this is not a real suspension, so there's no like real actual travel in it. But that looks pretty thick. Okay, moving on, we actually are going to be taking some parts from our previous sets, like the cylinder head, and obviously this is the block we just got, but we're actually going to be using some of the intake manifold here, and also the fuel rail too as well. And then these actually are vacuum lines, not vacuum lines, hard lines for I can blink coolant, and that's actually I think this is a they called it a I believe it was a vacuum fuel line, vacuum pressure. Okay, I just googled this, and actually this is the water bypass valve that's going to be put on there, and this is such a small detail they didn't really need to do, but they did it, and I think that's awesome. The hyper realistic hyper realism of this model kit is really going to kind of show through in these really small details that sometimes you won't even be able to see it unless you're picking it up and like looking underneath the vehicle to see these kind of details. Something like the water bypass valve, or even remember the camshafts in the head that you don't even see anymore unless you're taking the engine apart. You're not going to see those anymore. So cool. Anyway, the first part is actually we flip the head over, and there are two studs here. We're going to be using this bracket actually to attach this head to the block, the half block here. This head. Sorry, it might have been cut off in the video. So it looks like we have the alignment this way. And we're going to putting it like this. I'm going to double and triple check and make sure I do this exactly the way they instruct. Okay. So actually, it's pretty ingenious how they did this too as well. To make sure you simpletons don't do it incorrectly, they actually have a keyway here. You can see on this one, and then no other one on this has a keyway, and then this one here is actually keyed as well. So that's perfect. So I know that this goes exactly right like that and gets bolted down. If they didn't have stuff like that, I swear I would have had strip screws and not had done this properly in so many ways. I really appreciate the fact that these are so detailed and really put a lot of thought into design to help people build these, especially this kit. And these small details really make a difference in helping people assemble, number one, but also just the detail of the vehicle itself. So I really truly believe that even if you're not able to purchase this kit, if you see a DeAgostini kit anywhere and you want to get into it, you can kind of expect this level of detail. And maybe it is just the 86 that has this level of detail. I don't know. This is the first one I've ever done, the DeAgostini one. But now I'm a firm believer that stuff that DeAgostini is going to be producing is super high quality. All right, that bracket is attached. Okay, with this L bracket attached, we then now move on to getting the half of this block attached. And from what I'm seeing, it will go on this side, and it will attach to these two holes right here. And that pretty much aligns to what we're seeing here. So I do need to screw the screw in a little bit further. I don't like to over tighten screws just yet, just because I do not want to strip any screws. If people actually do work on vehicles, stripping a screw is probably one of the worst things you can do, because it just adds in so much extra time to a project that you didn't want to spend time on. It could also damage parts. It can actually ruin the project you're working on if you strip a screw. So I want to take a lot of care in being as careful as I can. I'm really taking my time trying not to run out any of these screws here, and be very, very conscientious of that. Grab another screw. Attach this one out here. Alright. And that looks really cool. It's weird that's just a half a block, But man, look at the detail on that. Oh my god. And this is actually getting quite substantial weight wise. Excuse me, that's my phone. Wow, take a look at that. The details are amazing. And this is actually getting quite substantial weight wise too as well. It does look kind of funny with only half the block set, but this engine itself, I want to get a scale, and I should weigh this when the engine itself before obviously putting it into the vehicle. But I do want to weigh it and see how much in ounces and grams or what have you. This actually weighs. It is already pretty substantial in the hand, and I think that detail is so cool. Okay, next part is actually attaching the fuel rail, and the instructions say it goes right here and these 3 holes. Now, one thing it actually does say is that to get actually access to these side holes right here, you should probably remove these portions. I'm going to try to do it with them on because I really don't feel comfortable trying to remove them if don't need to. I figure out where these fuel injectors go. There are these small, super small holes right here. You guys can see that. These top holes right here are actually the fuel injector ports. The screws are going to go in here. These are going to screw in here. No problem. But these right here are going to be fuel injector ports. So these fuel injectors that you have on here are going to fit right in there. So these fuel injectors are going to need to go right in these small little holes over here. And then you got to screw these screws in up top. You can see it there. So I'm going to grab one while I hold this in. And then instructions actually say do the center one first. And if you need to, you can remove those fuel parts right there. So one kind of tip for everybody is that you can always back thread. So instead of righty tighty lefty loosey, you'll go lefty and loose it up a little bit. Just because if there is thread in there, which I believe these model kits do not have, you don't want to cross thread them. It's just going to give you a world of hurt later on. Gosh, look at this detail on just a fuel rail. I know this screw is huge, so it's obviously not to scale what you would see on a real 4AGE. But just the detail of a fuel rail with fuel injectors. That's so cool. Alright, I actually might pull these off to get access to these screw holes. That's great. Pull this one off. Remember, this is a double hole. So much detail. It's ridiculous. You're gonna hear me say that a lot during this project, so I apologize in advance if it's annoying. We can make a drinking game out of it. But the detail, you have to admit, is immense on this kit. Obviously, it's not like a real engine, right? That would be actually hyper detail, but the scale model, this is super cool. You can actually see the Focus that real quick. You can see where the fuel injectors are sticking out here too as well, because they are attached portion of the block in the block here. So cool. Right. All right. All set. Back together. Got the fuel rail on. Okay, for the next part of this is going to be the intake manifold. So what you got to do is get the alignment in like this. And again, this was part of part 4. That actually slid in really nicely. It looks like it's got some guide pins here too as well to get that attached. And there are going to be 4 screws that go attached right down there pretty simply. And there you have it. Part of the intake manifold is on. Now, the next part is actually getting this portion on. And it goes right here. It is a half circle, and that is half circle as well. So we'll go ahead and use the tweezers on this one as best we can. And that was a really tight fit, but it's actually really secure too as well, which actually is really nice. The plastic of this part was able to deform to the metal, which is really nice. It means it's going to hold it. Okay, and then this portion, or is it this one? Is going to be attached right here. And then this goes right into this hole right here. Okay. There's a screw. It's great. And finally, this portion goes right here. One more screw. And there you have it. We are done with this part. For now. Let's just take a minute and admire the details again of this model kit. That's so cool. The fuel injector details just make it really, really awesome. You don't really see stuff. You know, if you look at regular scale models, they're usually kind of all one piece, right? If they do have some engine detail, if any. But to actually be able to put individual parts on makes this model kit so unique. Yes, when we have half engine, but it's getting there. And we'll see that other side of the block probably pretty soon. So thanks a lot for joining me today, guys. Just to kind of recap on what we worked on today, we did the off the cross member, the front shock and shock absorber, as well as the control arm too as well. Looks really cool. Got the spring mounted. We also brought in the pieces from our last one. We had finished up the head, added the fuel rail that we did last time, as well as the intake manifold, and we added some cooling hard lines, and just admiring the detail work that we've done thus far. This kit is looking amazing. I really am stoked at how this is turning out so far, and really impressed on how much detail there is already. And this is only the engine. I mean, yes, the engine is probably the most complex part, but looking at the rest of the kit, you've got the entire car to build. So thanks again for joining me today on the Toyota Sprinter Trueno AE86 by DeAgostini. I had a lot of fun building it with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. If you want to, leave a like on the video. That'd really help me grow, but also a subscribe would be awesome too as well. So I'll see you guys in the next one, and have a good rest of your day. See ya.